Hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Ever scare yourself? Have such a demented mind that you need to lock it away? Well, tonight, I'm going to set it free. So, cast off those shackles and get ready to bring fear to life with a little story that I like to call Where Monsters Come From.
Okay, well, most of you already know who I am, so I can skip that part. Those of you that do know me also know that I am a writer. Recently, something's been happening. Something disturbs not only my dreams, but my waking world as well. Now, I've never considered myself a great writer, or even a good one at most times. So, when I get remarks regarding how great my stories are and how immersive they can be, I take the praise for what it's worth, but rarely concede to agree. They say we are our own worst critics. Now, I don't know if it's something natural that disturbed my dreams, or if my effective use of description, fueled by dreams, that's helped to sculpt the reality of my life, currently anyway. Alright, I suppose it's best for all, including myself, if I just start from the beginning. The night was a dark one, and the overwhelming sense of dread was nearly palpable in the air. Glenn was standing in his den alone, forgetting his intentions as the aroma of what can only be described as electric discharge pervaded his nostrils. Something was behind him, watching him. Glenn could feel the burning stare of something malevolent, like prey sensing a predator nearby, almost like instinct. Slowly, Glenn turned his head and saw nothing but darkness. The power outage had devoid Glenn of his sense of sight, the shadows proving too thick for eyesight to pervade. But he knew something was there. He knew it, but found himself too terrified to leave the room, feeling its presence to be too close to the door for a comfortable chance at absconding. Glenn took a step backward, the floor creaking beneath his foot, but a lightning flash froze him with paralysis as he was left to ponder the horrific perceptions that he only had a second to take in. And the subsequent thunder clapped loudly outside the home, cultivating a resulting rumble like a drawn-out growl that would have been more than suited to come from that thing rather than from the heavens. He had only a fraction of a moment, but the still frame in his mind remained ever present and bringing with it an overwhelming sense of dread. Glenn stood analyzing that cognitive representation in his mind over and over again, caught between the reactions of fight and flight. The visage in the flash presented a tall, dark creature, contrasted against the white walls behind it that reflected the energy from the storm outside. The thing had to have been at least 7 feet tall, matching at least the size of the door that led to the hallway beside it, the door that led to his freedom. It was thin, frail, and although it appeared to be naked, its flesh seemed rigid and dampened with a clear residue of fluid, like that of pus. It wore a loose covering that draped over its shoulders and wrapped the length of its arms, falling past its knees and unbound in the front. The way its sleeves dangled made the appendages appear skeletal-like. The cloth, at first, appeared to be a dark red, but the more Glenn pondered it in his mind, thinking about the shade differential throughout, realized it to be the former white, now drenched and sopping with rouge. but its eyes, the large orbits above its toothed, blackened smile and absent nose, are what froze Glenn in place, as if his feet were nailed to the floor. They appeared to be way too large for its head and slender facial frame. Not enlarged in any way, more like entirely revealed. No lids in which to conceal them. Each was bulbous and profound, slightly yellowed, and in the instant of that brief flash of light, they were fixated motionlessly on Glenn. "Honey, are you coming to bed?" This is how far I had gotten when I had heard my wife call me from down the hall. "Yes, I'm coming, dear," I called back to her. I was deep into one of my late-night writing sessions, the kind of situation where one gets caught up in their passion and ignores the fleetingness of time. It was something that she often became frustrated with, as it was a common occurrence. But down at the pit of things, she understood. She claimed she liked my stories, and I believed her, as she seemed as genuine as her expressionism. But still, the absence of a spouse, neck-deep in the immersion of creating gruesome fantasy worlds, was bound to create at least a little friction. I love her. She really is a truly remarkable person to put up with my bullshit. I closed my laptop and locked away the grim fantasy creatures within, forcing my PC to sleep. I was off to do the same. From the moment I had shut it with the subsequent clap of plastic, I could sense that something was wrong. It wasn't something I could put a finger on, nothing out of place, and there was no indication of anything awkward, but it was like the feeling of being watched by some unseen creeper, lurking in shadows or concealed with purpose. But, like I said, there was no reason for the feeling, other than recently pulling myself from a fictional world of the grim macabre. So, this is what I attributed those dreadful feelings to, shaking them off and heading to the bedroom, preparing for a night of rest. The hallway was long, but only a few doors to the end, and at the end was the door to our master bedroom. There were no sounds or sights of the grotesque, and my wife was waiting within, laying on the bed in her evening gown with a smile on her face. She was happy to see me, not only after a long day at work, but also mind-deep in the annals of my creative writing. This only supported that there was nothing to fear, that my feelings of doom were right to be attributed to nothing but the machinations of my inner mind. At least, that's what I thought then. That night, everything would change. I had been in bed with my wife for a few hours at this point. I was fast asleep and oblivious to my surroundings. Suddenly, I was jolted out of slumber by a shaking. It was my wife, and she was shaking me at the shoulder, trying to wake me up. With a groan of displeasure due to being awoken prematurely, I heard her whispering to me. I looked over at her and noticed the fear in her eyes before I could discern her communicative efforts, the impositions of leftover sleep still draining from my waking mind. "Did you hear that?" she said quietly. "I thought I heard something downstairs." I acknowledged her words and listened for a moment myself. Nothing. The house was deafeningly silent. If someone had been moving around, I surely would have heard them. I assumed I'd be able to go right back to sleep after hearing no intruders in the dark, but she insisted I get up and go look for myself. Hesitantly, I agreed. The hall was dark, as expected, but when I flipped the switch for the light, nothing happened. I was left in darkness. Maybe it's a blown fuse, I reassured myself, hiding behind logic to negate my fears. As a horror writer, I have a very active imagination, and if not properly regulated, it has been known to get the better of me. So, I pushed onward. When I reached the top of the stairs, I paused for a moment. About a minute passed while I waited to hear something lurking in the dark below. Still nothing. Maybe it was just the sound of the house settling or something, I thought to myself. I was contemplating my first step when I got hit with a hint of something wafted, an aroma that graced my nose so gently I had only recognized it as unfamiliar to my home, but nothing more distinguishable than that. It was gone faster than it had arrived, and amounting to nothing, so I shrugged it off. Now, my steps creak, but depending on the step, sound can be avoided with proper placement of feet and distribution of weight, knowing the hidden secrets of each step. I made a very slow and very quiet decline into darkened gloom of the first floor. I stepped into our living room, and although there were no lights on, it was easy to see that there was no one inside, unless they happened to be hiding behind the coffee table or end tables. But even then, a person would have to be incredibly small and wouldn't present much of a threat anyway. But regardless, I cautiously made my way over to our fireplace, checking each nook and cranny as I did, until I reached for the poker, once within range. That smell came back when I leaned in for it. I grabbed the thick, cold iron handle before spinning around and reinvestigating the area with my eyes. Nothing had changed. Nothing but that smell. Then, a clattering sound emanated from the left of me, and a dreadful thought washed over my mind. Someone's in the kitchen. A beige tile floor cascaded in pale moonlight, seeping through the windows over the sink. A wood island in the center. Nothing out of place. The kitchen was empty. There was no indication that anyone or anything had been there recently, but I heard it unmistakably only a moment beforehand. The only change was the crescendo of that odor, sour and foul, with a background essence of something similar to that of mold. The smells contrasted each other, smudging distinguishability, but it had become so intense now that individual components were beginning to surface. I started to gag and turn my head to the side, covering my mouth. That's when I noticed it. The basement door. It was open a crack, and the missus and I have always made it a point to keep it shut. The cellar was unfloored, damp and cold, and the two of us agreed that the area should remain closed off from the rest of the home. No need in heating or cooling a dank space so rarely used. I knew that whoever it was had to be down there, and honestly, at that point, I was just hoping that the basement would provide some sort of respite from that rancid aroma. Once nearing the door, I was dismayed. It was thick now, so palpable I could taste the smells in my mouth. A taste and smell like rotting meat and earth, rotten flesh and earth, and something burnt, like smoking electrical wires. My thoughts bent, attempting to once again rationalize what the hell was happening. I reached for the door and stopped. A handprint, black as night, and once touching it, smeared like charcoal, recognizably fresh. Suddenly, I heard a terrible, high-pitched scream emanate from the second floor. That was my wife. My heart threatened to leap from my throat, and I was running before I had even realized it. I rounded the corner into the living room and darted up the stairs, foregoing any attempt at stealth. I heard her crying as I ran down the hall, her weeping getting louder as I approached the door. Without breaking stride or momentum, I flung open the door, the bulk of it slamming into the wall behind it with a bang. "What's wrong?" I asked her. She looked at me with terrified eyes. Whatever it was, it had notably scared her half to death. What she told me frightened the hell out of me. But it was preposterous. I couldn't believe her, not at first. But the thing is, this happened again, a few nights later, and again a few nights after that. Now he visits her in the day, and even though I hate to admit it, I've been seeing him as well. We've called in a platoon of so-called experts, psychics, supernatural investigators, you name it. We even contacted a historian who did quite a lengthy and thorough investigation of the property's history. None of it helped, and I was forced to do a little research of my own. Nothing matched the description of what I was searching for, so I began searching things like group hysteria and creations of the mind. That's when I stumbled across the term tulpa. A tulpa is a concept in mysticism of a being or object which is created through sheer spiritual or mental discipline alone. I've contacted other creators, artists, authors, etc., and compared experiences. Most assumed me to be a lunatic, but I managed to find some who reported similar instances that seemed to solidify my assumptions. When all other solutions are exhausted, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth, or so logic dictates. What my wife had seen that night, and the both of us have been noticing out of the corners of our eyes ever since, is that monster in the dark from my story. His tall, gaunt, blackened frame, bloodied shroud, those bulbous, fleshy, yellow, gleaming eyes, and he keeps getting closer. This is my last hope. I think by sharing this story with you, the essence of this being may now exist in your mind as well, and maybe, just maybe, he'll have found new prey in which to torment. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never expected the small worlds that serve as a canvas for my literary brush would seep into this reality like cockroaches through the cracks between dimensions. But I have. And if you were me, you'd save yourself too. I don't expect your forgiveness, but from where I sit, it's better you than me.
Well, if you're feeling under attack and can find no aggressor, don't forget to look inside yourself, or under your bed, just to be sure. And as always, remember to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.